My hope is that exactly that they can have hope, that they know that there is, even in the hardest of situations, that, I remember when I was in school, totally bullied. Everywhere I was, there was no safe place. There was no refuge. And I didn't know that, but I thought everything was dysfunctional. And I think my biggest thing was I didn't have hope at some point. I, had despair. I didn't know, I had sorrow. I'm like, is this always going to be this way? Am I always going to feel this pain? Am I always going to feel unloved? And the hope for me was knowing that, yes, I had to go through some of that hard pain of have revelations about, different abuses that happened. But now, because I've been able to go through it, I feel like a different person, and now I can help many other people. So was it great that it happened? No, never say that. And I have a heart for anybody who's been through it. But I think the biggest thing is that now I have gone through, and I can say, even as scary as it is to go through some of those very hard, complex times that is a process, that it is possible to do to heal, and it is possible to be able to have hope and live again and have dreams and really move forward and staying in the same place. That you can continue with your life, and you don't have to stay in that place forever. Taking this next step and investing in yourself is going to lead to things that you never dreamed of, going from that hopeless to hope, to really learning that instead of confusion and feeling like you have to isolate, that there's people there that care, that where you feel like you always have to self-protect, that there's safety, and that there's trust, and that there's love. That the biggest thing when we go through stuff is that that you're loved, and that you're heard and seen, and that you don't have to go through that alone.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I have a guest with me today who is a doctor. What? The doctor is here. The doctor is here in session with us. The doctor will see you now. I love when I hear that. The doctor's here. Dr. Amanda Helman is here, and she's an author, and she is going to help us today as we go through a memoir and talk about complex trauma, talk about the people that she's serving through her coaching, and just get to know a little bit more about our guest today. Welcome to the podcast. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here too, David.
Excellent. Excellent. So we've had a chance to talk already, and a little bit of background with you as well. Can you bring our listeners and our viewers up to speed on a little bit about you? And then we're going to change gears and switch a little bit into your author journey.
Okay, sure. Great. So again, thank you, and nice to be here. My name is Dr. Amanda Helman, and my background is in education, educational leadership, counseling psychology, just got my master's, mental health advocate, and really looking at all of those things come together into what I do now, which is called Healthy Roots LLC. And I'm the founder, and I basically do breakthrough coaching, and that is helping a lot of women and men who are high performers break through any barriers, any emotional barriers, anything in their past, to really move into a lot of peace, balance, and wellness, so that they can have better relationships with themselves, others, and meet their goals. And I think the biggest thing is learning balance and learning harmony within is something key to what I do with them.
Amazing. Okay, that's so many things to talk about just right there alone. Who are you working with right now that's inspiring you or is challenging you in some of the things that you have written about or learned or thought about previously? Is there a situation right now that you're dealing with where it's a challenge for you, but you're learning in the process?
Yes, I do have some clients that I work with are high performers who really didn't realize they have so much bottled up, and they've done a lot of performance. And so the interesting thing there is that I can probably within not even a minute of being with me, all of a sudden their walls come down and they realize, oh my goodness, like I have done all this performance, but who am I? And really helping them to uncover that, but they trust me. The biggest thing is trust and learning about themselves, good things. Like they're like, I don't even know who I am without performance and achievement. And that to me has been the biggest thing is working with the high performers who usually wear that mask or they keep going and function in achieving, but when they actually slow down, they realize, well, who am I really? And so that's been an interesting part because yes, I've been a high performer in those ways, but I also had the other side where I completely stopped because I knew I needed that, additional healing. And so that's been a learning opportunity for me as I work with people that hide it and getting to that and lowering knowing that there's trust and safety, and then getting to the deeper stuff that might have that they don't realize has impacted them and formed who they are, but really getting to that deeper, like, who am I just in the being, and then from being I can do. And so that's been one of my unique learning opportunities that I've had with a lot of clients, and they've had success. Like, oh my gosh, I really had no idea that the depths of it would actually launch me into who I am in my next move. So a lot of them are writers, a lot of them are authors, and they felt comfortable in their field, but not having a voice outside of their field. They felt insecure. And now it's learning their value in any setting, that their voice matters anywhere they are.
Okay. Because I think in social media terms and the world in general, we always feel like if we're a creator or we have something to serve an audience, we always need to be on the stage. We always need to be engaged, high performing, go, 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 very little time for ourselves. And why do you think society in general values high performance and these achievements, these awards, these milestones? Why is it so important in our culture to be on that treadwheel to keep up with everybody else?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple of different things, but one of the big things is in our family lines. Just think about it. I actually going to be talking about this more, but a lot of times there's been trauma in different families. And so whether it be slavery or different things that have happened, right? Families not having disappointment, not getting ahead. And so I feel like each generation's like, oh, my kids, you have to get ahead. You have to do better or bigger things. And not that you can't do that, but I think people have done that and it's really impacted our belief that I'm not good enough or I am loved. And so what people do is they're compensating by saying, okay, if I show all this stuff, then maybe people will see me, people will hear me, people know that I'm loved and that I'm worthy and value. So what we do is we take all the external things and we put value on that rather than knowing our internal value, which would totally shift it. And I think that's what happens. And anywhere in society, you see that people is, of course, right? Like we want to have the houses or things like that. But what happens is we become so exhausted in doing that we're burning out rather than learning how to balance that we can do that and still have our time and still have our families and still have relationship.
Yeah, because I think as a parent, like my 3 kids are now, I'm an empty nester. My wife and my kids are off doing life now. And I've always wanted, as they're growing up, to push them forward and to have them do better, like to have, opportunities that maybe I haven't had. But it's always been others focused and not so much focused on myself. And what do I need? Right. So in our culture, I guess what I'm seeing is a lot of people so focused on others that they neglect themselves in the process. So are you saying that through your work that we really need to not just focus on others, which is not totally wrong, but focus on ourselves and also bring ourselves along in the process? Is that kind of a little bit of what you're helping people with?
Yes, I am. So it is. It's just that a lot of times we've taken on the self-care or caretaker role.
Yeah.
And of course, we want to love and help others. But what we do is we haven't learned how to love ourselves and give ourselves the care so that we can when we do care for other people, it's at a place of balance, it's at a place of peace. And we're not, I always say, when you have a water bottle, you want to have it full. And a lot of times we're at like the last drops. A lot of my clients are the last drops. And how can you give any more out? And so that's been me, that's been my journey. And I see that in them. So we really look at, well, how can I keep my jar full, like you said, and take care of myself so I can take care of others. And there's a healthy balance so that I'm not, I'm not all burnt out and having nothing left.
I had an author come on and they were sharing about a story from their childhood about their mother making cookies. Now you're like, where are we going with this? But the mom would make the cookies and she would present the best cookies, the nicest ones that look good, perfect shaped, well cooked, exactly pristine, like in a book. She'd present that to her family, and she would take the broken ones, the burnt ones, the dark ones, the ones as nice, as presentable, and she would take those. So she always put in life, using the cookie reference, she always gave her best to everybody. And whenever there was leftovers or things that weren't presentable, that she kept for herself. So she was always on the back burner in life. And in general, she just kept giving and giving and giving to everyone else, but never focused on herself, never focused on giving the best to herself, right? She would always just took the scraps in life. And I think it's kind of a way of looking at our lives where we don't invest in ourselves and we just give ourselves whatever's left over at the end of the week because we've done this for everyone else. And I think what I love about listening to you and reading through your website and everything is that we really need to invest in ourselves.
We do. And I think I love that you talked about the cookie thing, because isn't that true? Like, even, have you ever been somewhere where, even when I grew up, my grandmother, right, she would have all the food, and who would eat last? My grandmother. She'd eat last. Oh no, I'm good. And so we'd have to make sure we kept the food for her. And of course, you want to serve and you want to honor and being a guest, but she would always want to just take the lesson. No, you take all that, you take all the extra. If there's nothing left for me, that's okay. Right. And so that's sort of what happens, I think, in life with us, and it goes back to that value. So I love that cookie thing, because that reminded me of my grandma, and even families where we go back to, and it's like, no, I'm good if I just have the crumbs.
Yeah. I'm here to serve. As long as you guys everybody's good, you're good, everyone's good. Right. And then me. Sometimes, and it's that oxygen mask analogy, right? When the oxygen mask falls in the airplane, you're not supposed to take care of your kids first, you're supposed to take care of yourself so that you can help others. And that just keeps coming back up in many, many instances where people bring that up. But yeah, like if you focus on everybody else and you neglect yourself and now you become part of the problem, you're not helping anybody. So what can we do? How do you help? And how do we get out of this mentality where we're last place? And in some situations, we need to put ourselves forward. How do you help people do that?
It's a great question. Well, there's many different ways. So I love the brain, right? So I really help us think about that using our brain functions, executive functionings. And one way is I help people look at their time, because time is very valuable. And so I usually say to people, well, where are you spending your time? And I have them look at it. Maybe sometimes it'll be a week, a 24-hour period. And so where is your time? And a lot of times I do an upside down way of doing this, because for me, I usually have people, again, depending on their background, if they're faith-based, what's most important, like then yourself or family, friends, and I have them go that way. And one of the last pieces is their job. And so instead of putting your job first, right, because everybody puts their job first and then like, oh, everything can go around it. And what I do is I have people think and say, okay, I want you to do a schedule. Where are you, right? Where are your family, and where are friends and acquaintances? So I have them think about it, and we actually do a schedule that way, and then build in their work time, because if you have the other things that are priorities, then when you do your work, you're actually going to have more balance.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in a world where there's no trauma, there's nothing to derail you, there's a path you can follow, and you can start putting yourself first and invest in yourself. But tell me how trauma derails the process. What does that do to throw you off, and what kind of unique challenges does a significant trauma impact in your life in what we're talking about?
That's a great question. Trauma, whether it's one event, which can be like one event for trauma could be being a witness of a car accident, or actually being a victim, or ongoing complex trauma, which is ongoing periods of time, such as sexual abuse, medical trauma. You're constantly watching domestic violence, for example. So there's a range of different traumas, but they all matter. And what happens is that even if you've had trauma, even early, we could have trauma in the womb, for example, sometimes where there's anxiousness to when you're a toddler. And what happens is if it happens early, there's a lot of impact on your development, your brain development. There's actually been fMRIs, which are basically brain scans, that have shown the difference between young kids who had trauma versus kids who didn't, maybe that complex traumas. And it showed there's more activity in some parts of the brain that normally wouldn't be. And what that means is that some of those impulses or even, memory, or even sometimes you'll see an overlap with ADHD. Now they're different, attention deficit, hyperactivity, and trauma, but there's an overlap because some of those symptoms can overlap, but they're different. And so you'll see kids that might struggle with attention, right? You might have kids that are crying or having nightmares. And so what it does is it impacts your emotions, it impacts your physical being, it impacts everything of your identity. A lot of times, who am I is what happens. And kids start to feel, and even teens or whoever start to question, like, who am I? Am I safe? Can I trust anybody? Can I trust myself? Am I belonging? Am I loved or accepted? Because what happens is, depending on the trauma, it impacts us in such ways that you just don't know if you belong. You sometimes don't feel like you're here. You're questioning everything about yourself because perhaps if it was sexual abuse or some type of abuse, you don't feel valuable. You don't feel worthy. You don't feel seen. And so, for example, those are some examples, David, of what happens with trauma.
Wow. And I didn't even really think of it even as simple as a car accident, right? How that can affect you. Like, my mind seems to go to extreme traumatic situations where life altering, and you think, how can you ever proceed from that point? But something as simple as an accident, how that can set you on this path. That means anyone can experience trauma. You're not exempt in life. And that you need to surround yourself with people who can help you. Right.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it, is that there's little t, we call it little t trauma, which could seem like, okay, you're watching something, right? Or maybe you saw an accident, but just think about it, David, in this area, we could be on the side of the road watching something, or maybe the ambulance has come and we don't realize that's actually a part of us watching something that could be traumatic. If we see something in that accident, or it could be a trigger for people with trauma. I've had people where they heard an ambulance and all of a sudden, like, I don't know why I'm starting to panic and having my heavy breaths, and it's reminding them back to the night that their parent died. And so it's really interesting how traumas, or even sounds or thinking or visions, can actually, we don't realize how it impacts us.
It's those triggers, right?
Yeah.
And we might not understand or where they come from, or how that you even have these triggers until they happen. Yeah. And I think, there's been many times where I know myself, I've just been walking down the street and a woman had an accident and fell through a glass window into a store. Wow. And everyone was standing there, like, didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I'm just like, I got to help her, because there's a chance she get hurt more. And then you walk away from that experience and you try to go back to normal, and you're just like, I can't believe that just happened. And that's like, as soon as you start talking, a light switch goes off for me, and I'm like, do you remember that time? And I'm like, I'm there right now. So I can feel it as you're even talking. So it's something that you don't even know when it's going to come back up again. Right.
And that's that the whole thing. So see, you just gave a great example. And that's, imagine when people are talking, and sometimes we don't realize, for our kids or adults, and all of a sudden we might say something, or we have a tone, or there's a certain perfume. And all of a sudden, if we don't realize there's a trauma memory, I call it, like, because trauma can imprint after 90 seconds in our memory. And if we don't actually deal with it, all of a sudden, right, you could be back in a moment that happened a while ago because of that memory or taste or sound or whatever that is that takes you back to that moment.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you, that moment for me is so real. I can explain in vivid color, like a movie. I can tell you everything that I experienced in that moment. And it only happened for a split second of time, or a few minutes of my day. And I can go back there any point in my life. It's right there. So it's real. And so tell me how how you help people then who are coming to you for support. What does this look like as people work with you?
It's a great question. So a lot of what I do is first identify where they're at. So I do have some simple mindset assessments. So I have different areas in self-care, balance, even self-love, even in value. And so what I usually do is, for example, which I'll just do one with you, I have them say a statement, and it's usually an I am statement. And what happens is I have them scale it from 0 being no pain, nothing that they feel, to 10 being high pain, or, maybe something that they're not quite sure of that they believe. And what happens is, because they can't see it, they actually are present, they have to feel it. So for example, I might say, I am loved. And what I do is I have them repeat it, and then I have them scale, where are they? Like, do they actually believe they're loved, or do they not? And so I have that in different areas. And what the power of it is that there's one core belief. We all have core beliefs. And for example, I am loved, or I'm worthy of love, was mine. I can actually say it now in peace, knowing that's true, but that wasn't true my whole life. And what happens is we identify the core belief that sometimes we operate our responses out of. So we identify those. And from that, then I have little contents where, for example, for value, we might identify, well, what is the inside value you carry versus external? So we go through different exercises, or even shifting in our thinking, like using neuroscience, or even just different grids to help them identify where they are. And then as we move forward, and in fact, I just had a client who was a long-term client. She had one of my bigger coaching packages, and we went through the whole mindset, and there's at least 50 statements, and she had about 25 that were, I would say, like higher up. And by her last session, we went through it, every single one she went down, if not, and some were 0. She had a high 10 to a 0, and she believed it. And so every single sentence, and we were both like excited, and she was like, wow, to see the work that she put in and where she is and now where she's going in her business. So those are just some examples of what I do, is really get to those deep beliefs to help them identify where they're at, and then shift that in their brain, and shift those emotions out so that they can actually truly believe that they're valuable.
Amazing. So I always like listening to coaching, and I love to hear the process. I always kind of want to let people a little kind of behind the scenes of what it actually feels like to work with you, and kind of what that would feel like. Because for some people who've never reached out before, there's a lot of questions like, what is it even going to feel like? How does this work? What are we going to be doing? Like, that kind of breaks down a little bit of those walls, and then opens a conversation to start. I'm on the website while you're talking as well. Lots of resources here as well. Can you kind of talk through how the website is set up for people to kind of to connect with you, and what they're going to see when they come to your site?
Sure. So I do have just a little bit about me on my first page, and then there'll be a little fly-in of a please subscribe. So you can, and that will lead you to, I have newsletters, usually comes out once a week, and I have a blog. So I have blogs that are on either abuse or healthy family connections. There's different topics. So that usually comes out once a week as well. And so I focus those based on my different areas. So mental health, leadership, family, communication, anything with coaching. So a lot of times with confidence, a lot of people really want to focus on confidence. I do a lot of blogs there. So you'll have that, and blogs are free. And then I do have on my page speaking engagement. So I do speaking engagement. So there's a tab on the top where you would go, and if you need that for family, education, leadership, you can put in a request, and then I'll get back to you. So that's one part. And then the final one is I have different coaching programs. So you can find that under the products, or get some more information about that, or even sign up. I have on my first page where you can get on a Calendly with me. So that's really, if you're like, okay, I want to learn more about this, or really meet with me, and you're like, this is it, like, knowing that there's something that you want to move forward in, then that's where you get in touch with me. And so that's my website. Pretty basic, to the blogs, to the coaching programs. I do have some courses on traumaplicity there as well. And then I do have the speaking requests.
And on top of all of that, you're an author.
I am.
So tell me, like, I'm on your Amazon page right now. I'm looking at
yes.
I'm Worthy, Loved, and Valued. Paperback. It came out December 31st, 2018.
Yeah. So my first
book. Available here. Yeah. Tell us about this.
Yes, and that too. Yes, I do have the books on there. Yes, I was thinking in my brain about my website. And isn't it fun? Like the new year. So for the new year of 2019, I wanted to have my book published. So I was in finishing my doctorate, and my friend Beth Custer, who's now a doctorate as well, she did the illustrations, and we thought, why not do this? So it was a book that I wrote in under 10 minutes because it's my message. And I think that really goes into my coaching, that you're worthy, valued, and loved. And that was something I never believed about myself. And those are three core areas that I feel like every person, I think in different capacities, has to go through and really solidify inside. And so it's a book that I had other kids do a review of. I had 6 kids talk about what they thought about the book. So I wanted the kids' voices. I'm big on voice. And then I had a friend talk about the book. And then each page is very diverse. It represents kids in wheelchairs or kids that, Black skin, Asian, all kinds of different backgrounds. So I wanted every kid to know that they're loved, valued, and matter. And it's funny because there's some funny things, like one kid picks his nose, but they're still loved, right? One kid's on the floor, like struggling for the day, and they're still worthy. And so just regular things that we might all feel, and even adults have read it and been like, yeah, I can relate to that, where we know, whether we're singing or we mess up or make mistake, we're not mistakes, but we could make mistakes. So I really wanted that message. And then at the end of the book, I have an activity. I'm an educator. So of course, we have an activity where they can be the author and they get to draw in, I'm worthy, I'm valued and loved, and finish the sentence and then draw a picture. So whenever I go, and I actually have spoken to schools and elementary schools, I have kids read that book with me. We actually all say the words, and we usually talk about the opposite, like I'm not loved, and we rip that up, right? We don't want to keep that in our brain. And then I have kids say each of these statements that they hear it and they actually affirm themselves. And then they each share they share their author page as well.
I love that you left space for them to fill in the book. That's great. That's a wonderful, great idea. And I love the message too. So amazing. So there's another book too that you just showed me before we hit record. And I love, again, when authors hold their books up. So please, shameless plug, let's put this up here as well.
Sure. And I never thought, so it's called Silent No Longer, Finding My Voice After Complex Trauma by myself, Amanda Helman. But the interesting thing is I never thought I'd be on the cover, and I'm on the cover. So, the cover artist, then it basically is my story, because we were deciding, is it my story or your story to get the audience in? But honestly, it was a memoir. It was my story and how I overcame it. And many people, I've had many women, I've had men read it, and even people who read it first to give me a review say, oh my gosh, the second time they read it, they're like, there's so much that's impacting me. And, that I realized there's some trauma, or oh my gosh, that happened to me when I was a kid. I can relate to what happened to you. And it's just been an area where people can then say, wow, that was me too. And I had no idea so many people have read it and said, yeah, I can really relate to some of the things or the thoughts you had gone through. And so I thought that was really helpful to know.
What is your hope when people read the book? What do you want them to walk away with?
My hope is that exactly that they can have hope, that they know that there is, even in the hardest of situations, that, I remember when I was in school, totally bullied. Everywhere I was, there was no safe place. There was no refuge. And I didn't know that, but I thought everything was dysfunctional. And I think my biggest thing was I didn't have hope at some point. I, had despair. I didn't know I had sorrow. I'm like, is this always going to be this way? Am I always going to feel this pain? Am I always going to feel unloved? And the hope for me was knowing that, yes, I had to go through some of that hard pain have revelations about, different abuses that happened. But now, because I've been able to go through it, I feel like a different person, and now I can help many other people. So was it great that it happened? No, never say that. And I have a heart for anybody who's been through it. But I think the biggest thing is that now I have gone through, and I can say, even as scary as it is to go through some of those very hard, complex times that is a process, that it is possible to heal, and it is possible to be able to have hope and live again and have dreams and, really move forward and staying in the same place, that you can continue with your life, and you don't have to stay in that place forever.
One thing I love hearing too from an author's perspective is how writing the book changed them. So at the beginning of the book compared to the finish of writing the book, what changed for you in the process of writing this book?
That's the good. Yeah, this book, it was interesting when I first knew I had to write it in 2019. I had really gone through some deep healing journeys, and I had journals. I had 7 years of journals from all of me processing. And so a lot of my book, when I went to write it, there was a lot of, I had processed a lot of it, but there were some, and near the end that I still had to process, some like heartbreak and, some of the loss. And so I felt like sometimes when you write a book first, especially memoirs, you're healing, right? You're writing to heal. You're writing to then rewrite it because now you have, written, and now you're like, okay, this is how I want to word it now. And then you're writing it in the area of like hope, or really writing it to really release that to the people reading it so that they can hear your heart with it. And so I feel like that was the process for me. But a lot of the healing had come before, except for some of the last parts of like my last chapter. And so when I went through it, it was pretty, that was my journey, and so I still had the healing in it. But I think the biggest thing was sitting with it, because sometimes we stop right during it. But what happened with me is I was able to take pauses, really process it, and then keep moving forward and writing. Because I always say sometimes we stop writing because it's the next layer of healing, and we're like, oh, that's going to be painful.
So the name of our podcast is Living the Next Chapter. So my question to you is, how are you in living your next chapter of this book? How are you living this today? And maybe what have you learned since the book has been published?
Yes, and I love that it's living the next chapter, because that's exactly it. I believe the pages have turned for me, and that my confidence, my ability to love myself, my really confidence, because I think a lot of times with trauma, you start doubting everything. And I doubted so much that my confidence was not there. And that was the biggest shift for me when I started to, in the next chapter, was not having that doubt, having confidence, knowing that I deserve to be valued and I'm worthy, and really taking myself into that priority. And so even with that, when I meet with all of the different amazing clients I have, that's what brings me joy, is that I see people, I know the journey, not just by a textbook, but I know the experiences, and I continue to go through those things and be real. And it's a safe place. I feel like I'm finally into almost like alignment. So I feel like for me, I finally am in a harmony that I think everybody deserves, to know that you're loved, you're worthy, that you're safe, that you're trusted, and that you can have peace and joy and move forward, and that healing's possible. So my next chapter is just all the things that I really felt like were stolen from me in my life, that it's all coming back in a good way. Like I'm actually, looking forward to the next, whatever's coming, but I know that it's all good.
So as we close off today, thank you so much for your time, first of all. But
Yeah.
for your next new client who's listening to you right now, what is your message to them? You haven't met them yet. They haven't talked to you one-on-one yet. How do you want to introduce yourself to them? How can you help?
Okay. I'm going to say that taking this next step and investing in yourself is going to lead to things that you never dreamed of, going from that hopeless to hope, to really learning that instead of confusion and feeling like you have to isolate, that there's people there that care, that where you feel like you always have to self-protect, that there's safety, and that there's trust, and that there's love. That the biggest thing when we go through stuff is that you know that you're loved, and that you're heard and seen, and that you don't have to go through that alone.
There it is right there. And I love how you're presenting your thoughts. I love how you're helping students, you're helping people come and find that place where they can address their trauma, grow through it, and find that support. Thank you for creating this space.
Thank you for thanks you for allowing me to talk about it and share it here.
Everyone, please go. We have all the contact information in the show notes. So please go to the website. Please go jump on Amazon. Go find these resources and support a great author, a great help, a great doctor who's here to help you. And again, in our time together, I've really appreciated our conversation and getting to know each other. It's great to find inspiring people in my day, and you have met and exceeded that again. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave.
Excellent. Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website, and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com. Click the little icon, little microphone icon. Leave a voice message. We'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message on livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Love to hear from you. Till the next episode. It's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.